Gamecocks drop another conference game and road game to the Missouri Tigers, losing 34-12. Let's talk about it on this Locked On Gamecocks.
You are Locked On Gamecocks, your daily podcast on the South Carolina Gamecocks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, Gamecock Nation, and welcome to the special live reaction edition of the Locked On Gamecocks podcast, where we cover your team every single day. I'm Andrew Lyon, the host of this podcast, and I'm also a staff writer for Gamecocks Digest over on SI.com. Thank y'all so much for making the Locked On Gamecocks podcast your first listen or watch for your team after the game here today. We are free and available both on YouTube and wherever you get your audio podcasts daily. This special live reaction edition of the Locked On Gamecocks podcast is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of the Locked On Podcast Network. Make every moment more right now as new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. Okay, well, I have to admit, in a way, I kind of saw this coming in the sense that I did not think South Carolina was going to win this football game when I made my prediction earlier this week. I did not think that this game would remain close, but the frustrating part once again for South Carolina is that while the final scoreboard might indicate that this was just a runaway victory for the Missouri Tigers, South Carolina had a chance to get back into this football game, and they squandered it late due to a couple of bad decisions, in my opinion, by Shane Beamer, one major one early in the fourth quarter, and also just a couple of mistakes made on both sides of the ball, especially in the first half, which when you amount all of that up, it just was too much for the Gamecocks to overcome at the end of the day. So let's talk about the offense to start. Once again, Spencer Rattler was practically running for his life back there. And after what we saw the Gamecocks do against a decent Florida Gators defense back in week 7 this past Saturday, we all sort of had a feeling that this might be a game where the Gamecocks offensive line might have turned the corner. They might have finally figured something out here with some of these personnel changes that they made. And unfortunately, we saw this unit take a step back on Saturday afternoon. Now, part of that was because they did not have Vershon in the starting lineup. And as we all saw once again, it's quite clear that you take a guy like Vershon out and you replace him with a couple other guys that are not starting originally. The drop-off is pretty obvious, and it is pretty significant. And that's the best way I can put it with that. It is also clear that this unit is still one that needs to work on defending delayed stunts and twists. Missouri got this unit a couple times in the first half because of that, especially on third downs. Really good play calls by Blake Baker of the Missouri Tigers coaching staff. There was also some times where this entire offensive line was actually sliding to one side of the formation, and the guy that ended up getting through scot-free was a guy that they sort of vacated on the other side of the formation that they were sliding away from. Now, I don't know if that's because of the offensive line. I don't know if that's because of Spencer Rattler telling them to do it or if Dal Lockett is telling them to do it. I'm not sure what the exact issue was there, but saw that happen on multiple occasions. So Spencer Rattler, he never had a chance to get into a rhythm in this football game in the pocket. Rarely had time to sit back there and actually be able to try and diagnose everything that was going on down the field. And even when he did, this receiving corps for South Carolina, they've got some problems. Behind their top couple of players in this group, and Xavier Legette, I think you could probably throw out maybe a Trey Knox or Joshua Simon on the occasional maybe third down play on the field. Nicholas Harper, good to see that he is making some plays. He's really proving that he has earned the extra snaps that he's starting to get since South Carolina's bye week. I would expect that to continue to be the case, especially with Xavier Legette coming out of this game with an injury, an upper body injury that as of right now, we don't know if it's going to keep him out for this next week's game against Texas A&M or if he'll be able to come back from that pretty quickly. But my point that I'm trying to get to here is that this wide receiver group is not good at getting separation. It is just flat out not good enough. And this is a culmination of the lack of recruiting that this position group has seen over the past several years. I've tried to explain this to some people before, not everybody, because I know some of y'all obviously get it, but there's been others out there that did not understand that when you keep getting 3 stars on paper at a position like wide receiver in the SEC, guess what? At some point, it catches up to you. And that is showing up this year in a big way, and it's really shown up, in my opinion, over the past 3 games against Tennessee, Florida, and Missouri. It continues to be a problem, and the unfortunate part, the worst part, is that you cannot fix that overnight. You can't just grab, say, 4 or 5 players and then bam, all of a sudden now it's all fixed. A guy like Mazeo Bennett, he can help you. But the thing is, Mazeo Bennett's one receiver. You need more than one guy in this cycle, whether it's high school or portal, to fix that issue. So that's still also an ongoing problem with this offensive unit. Spencer Rattler, I have to say, if I'm Dowell Lawkins, I'm about falling out of my chair during these football games because Spencer Rattler, he's reached the point where he pretty much knows going into each game, he is going to get pressured. He's going to be chased out of the pocket. There's going to be times where he's going to have to basically run laterally, and the only chance of this offense extending a drive is by him being Superman. And so he's taking off running downfield, and he's taking all the hits in the world. And for the first time all season that I can really recall, Spencer Rattler looked a little bit dinged up after a couple of hits. He got walloped at one point by, I want to say, Johnny Walker Jr. Came through scot-free. Again, don't know why that happened. I'm not going to try to act like I did know why that happened or do know why that happened. But he got walloped. It turned out to be a fumble. Somehow no Missouri defender decided to try to jump on the football. I thought Spencer Rattler wasn't going to get up from that hit. He miraculously did and kept playing in this football game. If some of these issues do not get corrected, at least one of them, some wide receivers step up, or the offensive line, can step up, somehow find a way to overcome all the injuries. And I will say this, the injury statement is getting utilized way too much for the entirety of this football team. But there's one position group that can fairly be judged based off of injury luck, bad luck, I should say, and that is the offensive line, because they are really starting to get low in numbers here. If this group continues to sustain injuries like they have this season, you're going to start seeing possibly some walk-ons that are going to have to go out there and play. And again, no offense, because I'm sure South Carolina, they might have some really good walk-on offensive line on this football team. But again, there's probably a reason why some of these guys did not maybe earn a scholarship. I'll just leave it at that. Running backs, I don't think you can really judge running backs in this game. Mario Anderson Jr. really never got a chance in this football game. The interior, in terms of outside zone blocking, was not good enough. The exterior, or I should say the edges, they also, I feel like, they won their share of battles and they also lost their share of battles at the same time. So I guess my overall point is very much a mixed bag. And also when you go down 24-0, I want to say at some point in the first half, running the football goes out the window. You can't do it anymore. You have to start chucking the ball up and trying to get yourself back in this football game. You're in catch-up mode. So Mario Anderson Jr. never really got a fair chance to really have an impact in this football game because of extenuating circumstances. And I just mentioned part of the reason was because the team went down 24-0. And that was due to the play of the defense. The offense too, but the defense, it was complimentary football in the worst way. So I'm going to touch on some of the defensive issues that showed up in this football game in just a couple moments right here on Locked On Gamecocks. Today's show is brought to you by BetterHelp. Now, we are getting closer and closer to the holiday season. For a lot of people, the holiday season is the best time of year, whether it be Halloween, maybe Thanksgiving or Christmas, because you're getting together with friends or family, and it's a really good time. But there's other people out there that we need to keep in mind. People that maybe have gone through some family tragedies in their life. Maybe people that aren't as close with their families they would like. And I know it's tough to talk about, but it's a reality for some people. And those people might not exactly know where they need to go, maybe how to try and really get through some of the things that they're going through. And so if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online. It's designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Let therapy be your map with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnCollege today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnCollege. This live reaction show is also brought to you by FanDuel. Snap into the NFL action this season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can bet $5 to get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. There's a lot of viable Super Bowl contenders right now in the NFL. You look at teams like the San Francisco 49ers, the Philadelphia Eagles, maybe even a Miami Dolphins team. Although I have to say, if I had to pick one right now, I'd still probably pick the San Francisco 49ers. I think they're the most complete team so far this season in the NFL. If you think that's the case, or maybe you disagree with me and think another team has a better chance of winning the Super Bowl, now's the best time to join FanDuel and put your money where your mouth is. The app is easy to use, and you can bet on everything from spreads to player props and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season with FanDuel, an official partner of the NFL. All right, thank y'all once again for tuning in to this live reaction edition of the Locked On Gamecocks podcast, where we cover your South Carolina Gamecocks every single day, especially each and every one of you everydayers who make the Locked On Gamecocks podcast your daily choice for South Carolina Gamecock sports coverage. Okay, let's talk about the defense now in this football game. If there's one thing that I have finally figured out about Clayton White and this defense, when it comes to these games, especially games away from Williams-Brice Stadium, quite frankly, when it comes to both the players on the field and also the coaching staff themselves, this defense as a whole is way too reactive instead of proactive. And again, I am not naive to the fact that in today's game of football, it has never been more difficult for a defense to really just instill their will and honestly just take control of a football game. You used to be able to do that 10, 15, 20 years ago, especially. But now, offense is the game. The rules are catered around offensive plays, referees looking out for star quarterbacks, star wide receivers, the creativity of offensive play callers now. It's never been more difficult to be a defensive coach. I acknowledge that 100%. But at some point, when you constantly have bad starts in these football games, it's no longer just an isolated incident. It is an obvious reoccurring trend. And that goes for everyone. It goes for the players and it goes for the coaches. This defense, at the second level especially, they have a hard time diagnosing what's going on in front of them. The defensive line, in my opinion, it's kind of hit or miss depending on what kind of play they're trying to defend. With the secondary, I still have faith in this secondary. I know they've not had their best moments this year, but as I've touched on before, I don't think that's on the players. I think there's been some bad coaching decisions. Today, I think we saw Jalen Kilgore get a lot more nickel corner snaps, and I will admit, besides the first touchdown that Luther Burden got behind him, and I think another man that was actually trying to help double him on the back end, I thought Jalen Kilgore did a decent job. I won't say great job, but I think based on watching the game Saturday afternoon, he did a decent job. This linebacker unit has just got to be better. It's just got to be better. And it's not all on them, because they also have times where they make good plays, but maybe another position group sort of falters and makes a mistake. So I'm not trying to single them out, but I'll just say it again. I made the statement a couple weeks ago during the bye week. I think Grayson Pup-Howard needs to get more snaps. I think he needs to get more snaps at the second level of this defense. And I'm just going to leave it at that. First half was abysmal. No getting around it. It was absolutely abysmal. This was a matchup nightmare, schematically speaking, for this defense facing this Missouri offense, because this Missouri offense excels at a lot of things that this unit struggles in, and they exposed that again, or I guess at this point, re-exposed it on Saturday. Now, I will give Clayton White credit here. For as bad as that first half was, this unit showed up in the second half. They did. I believe they only allowed 56 total yards of offense to Missouri in that third quarter for 15 minutes. I don't think they've done that one time all season against an FBS opponent. I legitimately cannot recall any lower yardage total in one quarter against an FBS team in 2023. So That is a good sign. And another reason why it's a good sign, besides what we saw statistically out of that group in that third quarter, I tweeted something out in the first half that this might be a potential checkout game. Now, what do I mean by that? When a team has a bad season ongoing, like South Carolina right now, who is at 2-4 coming into this football game, you sometimes have a game where you get off to a bad start, like you did in this one, and one particular side of the ball, or maybe just a specific group of players, with everything that's been going on throughout the season, the rigors of practice, trying to put yourself through all the just physical and mental turmoil of being a student athlete in college, you get into a game like this, sometimes you just decide, you know what, I'm done. I'm done. I've had it. I've given it my best shot. And it just doesn't matter what I do. We're not going to get any better. At this point, I'm just ready to have the season be done with. That happens. It happens with plenty of teams. So I will say it is a great sign that this defense did not quit. This defense, in my opinion, could have easily mailed it in. And that second half, Missouri could have doubled their score. They could have gone up to the high 40s, low 50s. And admittedly, with all the mistakes they've been making the first half, that's what I kind of foresaw. I foresaw a path where they could end up giving up 42 plus points. But they didn't do it. They gave up just 10 points in the second half. So, credit to the defense for not giving up. Now, that does not excuse what happened in the first half. This defensive coaching staff has got to be better at game planning. Because at a certain point, a lot of this I attribute to coaching. I still see way too many fundamental errors that are made at the second level. Maybe it's because of tackling, or maybe how some of the edge defenders are attacking pole blockers. I'm still seeing too much of that from a staff that, outside of T-Rob, Travion Robertson, they've all been together for at least a whole season and are now going into their second season together. So there's no excuse for maybe coaches not to be on the same page with their players for the most part. I don't think they're getting the best out of this group, but I don't think this is a talent issue. I just don't think it's a talent issue. I think that this coaching staff, they're doing some of these players a disservice, because it's clear to me watching these games that these defenders are constantly, again, to keep it short and sweet, I think that they are honestly just thinking about way too much. And it's causing them to almost just lock up when they get to a certain point in a play, because they're absolutely terrified of maybe making the wrong decision, or they've got 3 or 4 different things running through their head of what could possibly be happening in the next 2-3 seconds. And by the time they finally kind of make a decision, the guy that's got the football has either just run right on past them, or they have gone in the complete wrong area, wrong gap on the football field, and they have just run themselves basically out of the play. I've seen it happen far too often in 2023, and that is with a defensive coordinator that's in his 3rd season here. So I'm not going to keep harping on the issues, because y'all know the issues at this point, especially if you've been watching and listening to this show. You know what the issues are with this defense. We've talked about it plenty of times, and it is definitely frustrating, and I'm sure it's way more frustrating for y'all having to constantly revisit this topic. Again, when it's an isolated incident, that's one thing. When it's a trend, there's deeply rooted issues that have to be addressed. And that is up to Shane Beamer. And quite frankly, I don't think Shane Beamer had his best game being an in-game coach. And I think there was one major mistake that he made early on in the 4th quarter that I wonder if he had a second chance at it, maybe he would change his mind. Obviously, hindsight's 2020. Anyways, the decision that I think he messed up on, I'm going to dive into that a little bit more in just a couple moments. Before we touch on that, I do want to let y'all know that this episode is brought to you by Bird Dogs. Now, I'm sure that when a lot of you are watching these games, you probably get to a certain point where you're just like, you know something, I just need to get out of the house for a minute. I need to go for like a 10, 15-minute walk. I just need to get away from this football game, not be looking at a TV screen. I need some time to myself. And if you reach that point and you want to go for those walks just to kind of take a deep breath and decompress, the best shorts to wear for those walks are Bird Dogs. They're very comfortable. They don't have that restrictive cotton type fabric that makes you feel, really cramped up with the stuff that you're wearing. And they've also got a cloud knit fabric that feels like khaki pants, but it stretches so that you get a way slimmer fit without having to sacrifice movement. So if you go to birddogs.com/lockedoncollege and enter promo code lockedoncollege right now at checkout, you can get a free Bird Dogs water bottle also with your order. That's birddogs.com/lockedoncollege for a free water bottle at checkout. You won't want to take your Bird Dogs off. I can promise you that. All right. Let's dive into Shane Beamer and his quote-unquote performance with this game. There are a couple of different things that he did that I was displeased with just in terms of objectively viewing his coaching performance in this game. And they all related to special teams, ironically enough. There was a time where it was 4th and short on Missouri's side of the field, and Beamer had a chance to go for it. I believe this was in the first half, late in the first half, early second half, and he decided to go for it. Decided to go for a field goal. But the problem was Beamer waited so long to make a decision that by the time the field goal unit got out there, and they got out there pretty quick, got set pretty quick, they wound up getting hit with a delayed game penalty because Beamer took too long to make his final call. You're a third-year head coach. That should not be something that you should be doing at this point. There was another decision that he made where Missouri, I think the defense stopped Missouri on 3 downs. I think it was a 3 and out. Missouri was on their side of the field, 30-something yard line. They punt the ball. The Gamecocks get the ball at their own 30-yard line. Decent field position. There's a flag on the play. It's illegal formation on the Missouri Tigers. Now, I'm sitting there thinking, Beamer should not accept this penalty. They're getting the ball at the 30-yard line, and if you're going to accept it, you're going to give this guy an extra chance to basically have a better punt. Beamer decides to accept the penalty. I'm not sure why he decided to accept the penalty. I don't know if for some reason he thought that maybe he would not have a bad punt, or maybe he would have 2 straight bad punts in a row, or maybe Beamer wanted to try and have a chance to block the punt with his punt block unit. I'm not sure what his rationale was behind it. Anyways, the next punt wound up going to about the 20-yard line. Eddie Lewis wound up getting tackled at the Gamecocks 18. They essentially lost 12 yards of field position because Beamer decided to take a 5-yard penalty on a 4th down where it did not seem like Missouri was going to either go for it or anything of that sort. They were also facing an Australian-style punter, which, if you know anything about football, Australian-style punters, when they get rolls on AstroTurf, usually works out in their favor. But despite all of that, Beamer said, let's make them punt it again. They lost 12 yards of field position because of it. But the one decision he made that I, for the life of me, could not understand and will not understand for the rest of this year, probably ever. First offensive drive in the 4th quarter. It is 4th and goal at Missouri's 3-yard line. You've had 3 chances to score a touchdown. You've not been successful. At this point in the game, you're down 27-9, 18 points, or basically 3 scores. There's 10.5 minutes left or so remaining in this ball game. I believe the clock is running as well, and we've got the running clock rules in place this year. So when teams get first downs, the clock doesn't stop unless you're inside of 2 minutes at the end of a half. Also, to top it all off, Xavier Legette out for the game at this point. Trey Knox and Amarian Brown also are both out of the game at that moment, and you probably don't know immediately if you're going to get either of those guys back in this game. So point being, you're running out of personnel at a key position, you're running out of opportunities, and you're running out of time. And instead of trying to go for a touchdown to possibly make this potentially a 10-point ball game in the best case scenario, Beamer decides that he's going to let his team kick a field goal. And you might think that's bad enough. His post-game press conference, he was asked about not going for it on some of these field goal tries. And I don't know if it was this question or maybe a different question, but point being, his reasoning for why he did not go for a touchdown on this particular drive, for what he said, was because he felt like that they could get the football back via a turnover on defense. So when I saw that and then heard it when watching the press conference back before I started this live show with y'all, I went back and looked at some stats. South Carolina's defense is tied for 94th in the country in turnovers forced. They have forced 7 all season, averaging 1 forced turnover per game. Missouri, on the other hand, they've only given the ball away 6 times. in, I believe, now 8 games this season. So basically 3/4 of a turnover per game, if you want to do the exact math on that. So you mean to tell me that not only did you go for a field goal, considering all the circumstances, which again, I already thought by itself was just a bad decision. Your reasoning was because you thought you could get a turnover with this defense, which, yes, was playing better in the second half. I understand that. But better enough to where they're going to get a turnover all of a sudden? There are some football coaches in this sport that are way too reliant on turnovers, and I'm starting to believe that Shane Beamer is one of them. You cannot rely on a bad play by the other team, maybe going here or there, or maybe good enough fundamentals on one play leading into a turnover. You cannot bank on turnovers. You just cannot do that. And yet Shane Beamer did that in the fourth quarter and he said that in his press conference, essentially. I don't have the exact quote in front of me, so feel free to go back and listen or watch it yourself, but that's literally what he said. I'm just baffled at that. And honestly, this is the first time that I've ever watched a game and left the game or, stopped watching the game thinking to myself, Shane Beamer was not the better head coach in this game. Like, forget talent, forget a talent gap, forget road environment, all of that stuff. In terms of pure coaching decisions, and sure, it's easier to make coaching decisions when you've got like a 3-score lead like Eli Drinkwitz had in this game for the majority of the contest. But Shane Beamer, with all that, decided to kick a field goal because he thought they could get a turnover forced. I have a lot of questions about your in-game decision-making if you're going to make that kind of call in this kind of game with everything going on right now. I can't understand that. I just cannot understand that. Also, Shane Beamer said in his press conference that he really felt like the team was prepared coming to this game. He didn't feel like the team wasn't prepared, was the way he put it. You cannot say something like that. And he also said that, I know you guys are sick and tired of hearing me saying it. Shane, you got to stop saying it. You can't be saying that when you just played a football game, you just coached a football game where your team went down 24-0 in the first 25, 28 minutes of a game. You just cannot say that. Because when you say that, the fan base sits there and thinks either A, you're just delusional, or B, that you're just starting to force feed lies to him. And I'm not accusing him of any of those things, but that's the way that comes off when you say basically that you felt like the team was prepared and the team was ready. And they come out and do this, especially when it's mistakes that they've been making all season. At some point, you can't keep saying, I thought the team was prepared. You can't keep saying that. You just can't. Objectively speaking, it's just not really that smart to keep doing it. So I think everybody played a part in this loss today. I guess that's really the overall summary of this entire live reaction show. I thought everybody played a part in this loss. Offense, defense, and coaches. And the unfortunate part, the concerning part is there's probably multiple games where we could say that this year. Multiple. You're in year 3. You and a couple other people as well. We can't be saying this all of a sudden now in your 3rd season. You're bringing in a lot of talent at most positions. Good sign. There's a lot of things that need to be fixed. I don't know how many more times that these kind of games have to happen. And maybe he's acknowledged that things have to be fixed, but maybe he feels like that they're not going to be able to fix them until after this season's over. I don't know what to expect anymore. And quite frankly, the best advice I can give all of you that are that upset and frustrated with how this team's playing right now, don't have any expectations the rest of this season. I will still go through these weeks, give you all my predictions, talk about these games, give y'all, paths for South Carolina to possibly win some of them. But there can no longer be expectations set for this football team. There can't. That needs to be just thrown out the window. At this point, whatever they do, it's what they do. Win, lose, overtime, whatever. So thank y'all so much for tuning into this reaction show. I appreciate each and every one of you. Be sure, again, to stick around and check out what all I got going on throughout the early part of next week and all the way through Friday. I'm going to possibly make some changes in terms of the content. I'm going to look back at some of these recruits that as of right now are still coming to South Carolina, kind of see how they're doing. And again, sort of give y'all a glimpse into the future of guys that could be big time impact players for this football team. So be sure to stay tuned for all of that. Otherwise, again, thank y'all for tuning in. I'll check y'all on the next show on the Locked On Gamecocks podcast.